Episode 07. The Order They Could Not Refuse. Why Fusu and Meng Tian did not resist. The edict reached the northern frontier. It ordered two of the most important men in the Qin Empire to die. One was Fusu, the eldest son of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. The other was Meng Tian, the northern general who commanded Qin's frontier armies. Fusu had imperial blood. Meng Tian had soldiers. Together, they stood far from the capital, but close to military power. So why did they not resist? Why did an emperor's son and a powerful general fail to turn suspicion into action? And why could a single document travel across the empire and break the northern command without a battle? Welcome to the Dragon Archive, where Chinese history is told through story, evidence, and the shadows left behind. In the previous episode, we followed the edict that changed everything. After Qin Shi Huang died at Sand Dune Palace, his death was not immediately announced. The original sealed message meant for Fusu was never delivered. According to the Shiji, Zhao Gao, the palace official who controlled access to imperial documents and seals, conspired with Huhai, the younger prince, and Li Si, the chancellor of Qin. Together, they destroyed the original letter. Then they created a new command in the name of the dead emperor. This new edict accused Fusu and Meng Tian of crimes, and it ordered them to die. But the most important question is not only who wrote the document. The deeper question is why the document worked. To understand that, we need to begin with Fusu. Fusu was Qin Shi Huang's eldest son, but he was not publicly confirmed as crown prince. He had bloodline. He had status. He may have had moral authority, but he did not control the capital. He did not control the imperial seals. He did not control the flow of information. Years earlier, after criticizing his father's harsh treatment of the scholars, Fusu had been sent north to Shang Commandery, where he served alongside Meng Tian. That distance now mattered. Fusu was close to the throne by blood, but far from power by position. When the edict arrived, Fusu could not see what had happened inside the imperial convoy. He did not know that the first emperor had already died. He did not know that the original letter had been destroyed. He did not know that the new order had been shaped by Zhao Gao, Huhai, and Li Si. What reached him was not a rumor. It was not a message from a private enemy. It came through the official channel of imperial authority. In the Qin system, that mattered more than anything else. An imperial edict was not ordinary information. It was treated as the written extension of the emperor's will. To reject it was not simply to question a document. It was to question the emperor himself. For Fusu, this created a trap. If the edict was real, refusal would mean disobedience to his father and rebellion against the throne. If the edict was false, obedience would mean walking into a political death sentence. But he had no reliable way to prove which was true. This is where Meng Tian becomes crucial. Meng Tian, the northern general, was not an ordinary commander. He had led Qin forces against the northern peoples. He had overseen frontier defenses. He stood at the head of a major military structure. At first glance, Meng Tian seems like the person who could have changed everything. He had soldiers. He had experience. He had influence in the north. So why did he not simply reject the edict? The answer lies in the difference between military power and political legitimacy. Meng Tian commanded Qin soldiers, but those soldiers were not his private army. Their legitimacy came from the emperor. Their orders came from the state. Their structure belonged to the empire. If Meng Tian resisted an imperial edict, he would have to transform himself from a Qin general into something much more dangerous. A man claiming that the emperor's written command was false. That required more than suspicion. It required another source of legitimacy strong enough to challenge the document. And the Qin Empire was designed to prevent exactly that. In later periods of Chinese history, powerful generals or regional commanders sometimes challenged suspicious orders from the court. They could rely on local military networks, personal loyalty, or competing centers of power. But the Qin system was different. It was a centralized, written empire. Authority flowed downward from the emperor through documents, seals, officials, and law. There was no accepted second center. No independent court in the north. No legal process for Fusu and Meng Tian to pause the edict and verify the emperor's true will. They could suspect. They could hesitate. But suspicion is not the same as resistance. To resist, Meng Tian needed more than soldiers. He needed a recognized reason for the soldiers to follow him against an imperial command. Without that, his army did not become a shield. It became a risk. This is the tragedy of the northern frontier. Fusu and Meng Tian were not defeated in battle. They were trapped by a system where obedience came before verification. Fusu saw the edict as the voice of his father. Meng Tian may have understood that something was wrong, but neither of them possessed a mechanism strong enough to prove the difference. Once the document arrived, the question was no longer what Qin Shi Huang had truly wanted. The question became who had the power to make the empire believe he had wanted it. And that power was not in the north. It was inside the controlled silence of the imperial court. Once Fusu accepted the command, Meng Tian's position changed completely. He no longer stood beside the emperor's eldest son. He stood alone. A general with soldiers, but without a recognized source of legitimacy. And in the Qin Empire, that was not power. It was danger. The edict had reached the north. Fusu and Meng Tian had been forced into a choice. But the consequences of that choice were only beginning. Because once the possible heir was removed, the next question was unavoidable. What would happen to the general who still commanded the northern armies? And why would Zhao Gao, Huhai, and the new court need to remove him too? That is where the next part of the story begins.
Thanks for watching The Dragon Archive. Every story here begins in the shadows, but returns to the records. If you want more stories from Chinese history, emperors, rebels, assassins, philosophers, and forgotten kingdoms, follow the archive. The past is not gone. It is waiting to be read again.